in tonight's headlines. The Housing Authority plans to step up scrutiny of property possessions of public housing applicants on the waiting list to include overseas properties. A residential plot in Shatin attracts 11 tender bids despite the frailing property market. And in another gaffe, US President Joe Biden mistakenly refers to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy as President Putin. The Housing Authority is intensifying its efforts to combat the abuse of public housing by taking more measures to examine the applicants' eligibility and prioritizing families' applications. Over the past 2 years, the authority has taken back 5,000 public housing units, equivalent to building a medium-sized public housing estate. Director of Housing Rosanna Law said in the latest round of property declarations, 380 households failed to return the forms, and they will be required to move out. Meanwhile, the authority is also considering expanding the mechanism to scrutinize the overseas property possessions of applicants on the waiting list.
我哋最近已經係致函內地或者係澳門嘅機構。
Law said that the authority recently found 9 public housing tenants to own properties in the mainland or Macau, which is violating the regulations, and their eligibility will be withdrawn. She added that more investigations will be carried out regarding the ownership of overseas properties among current tenants. Regarding the proposal of raising 10% of the public housing rent, the director said the raise is reasonable since the rent is still much cheaper than apartments in the market, and the raise would help the authority to keep providing service to citizens in need.
我哋鼓勵年輕人力爭上游。
Law initiatively responded to criticisms that housing policies prioritize families over young singles. She said the mainstream values still recognize the family as the core of society. The authority acknowledged the housing needs of young people, but encouraged young people to be self-reliant and not to solely rely on public housing or subsidized home ownership schemes. Since the current government took office, the waiting time for public housing has been shortened by more than 10%. Law was confident that by 2027, the waiting time would drop to 4.5 years. Jeremy Zhu, Cable News.
Amid faltering property transactions and high inventory levels, developers in the city look a bit hungry for land, with the first residential land tender close in the past 7 months drawing 11 bids. Despite its small size, the Siulik Yun site attracted bids from major local developers such as Sino Land, CK Asset Holdings, and Sun Hong K Properties. Major developers from the mainland had also shown interest, including China Overseas Land and Investment, China Merchants Land, and CITIC Pacific. The site is located in Siulik Yun Shatin with a maximum permissible gross floor area of 156,700 square feet and is expected to provide about 280 flats. According to the conditions of sale, a 60-place daycare center for the elderly, a center for home care services for frail elderly persons, and a lay-by will need to be built by the purchaser. The project is estimated to be valued at between $470 million to $780 million based on a per square foot land premium of at least $3,000. Separately, the Urban Renewal Authority received a total of 30 expressions of interest for the development of the Kai Tak Road Saipo Road project in Kowloon City. Covering a site area of 5,307 square meters, the project will provide about 810 units. Bess Leung, Cable News.
The pair of giant pandas to be gifted to the city by the central government would be housed in the existing panda enclosure in Ocean Park, and the government would keep rolling out activities to promote the panda economy, the tourism chief said.
即係接待兩隻大熊貓，唔係淨係要佢去生兒育女。
Speaking to iCable News, Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism Kevin Yuan said the government not only hoped to let the pandas breed and have offspring, but also to thrive comfortably and become a part of Hong Kong. Yuan expected a panda fever as the number of people coming to the city or visiting Ocean Park will increase, which will directly drive the economy. Related products and other services may also emerge as a result. Meanwhile, as the central government stepped up a series of measures to benefit the city, including expanding the list of cities under the individual visit scheme and raising the tax-free sales quota for mainland visitors, Yuan said new local attractions would also be created, not just to lure visitor spending, but also to ensure visitors have enjoyable trips. Regarding how to evaluate the effectiveness of the hospitality campaign launched last month, Yuan said it is difficult to set hard indicators, and what should matter most is that the campaign would promote good hospitality across different industries and sectors so as to enhance tourist experience. Jeremy Zhu, Cable News. A fire broke out in a unit at Ming Estate in Taiwan, prompting the evacuation of around 200 people, including teachers and students of a kindergarten. The blaze broke out shortly before 10 a.m. on the 7th floor of Ming House, causing thick smoke to billow out. Firefighters broke into the unit and extinguished the blaze using a single hose line about 20 minutes after arriving at the scene. An elderly living in a nearby unit felt discomfort after inhaling smoke. He refused to be sent to hospital and was treated in an ambulance, while over 100 other residents evacuated themselves to safe areas. Preliminary investigation suggested the fire started from a bathroom power strip within the unit. The cause of the fire is still under investigation.
US President Joe Biden took to the stage with NATO leaders Thursday night, announcing a new compact to support Ukraine, but mistakenly referred to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy as President Putin.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin. President Zelenskyy. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President, I'm better. You are a hell of a lot better.
At one moment, some leaders did not know whether to clap. Hours later, slip of tongue happened again, mixing up names of his opponent Donald Trump and his Vice President Kamala Harris.
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be Vice President, but I think she was not qualified to be President.
This time, 81-year-old Biden did not catch the error and correct himself. When asked if his gaffes were damaging Americans' standing in the world, he retorted,
Did you see any damage to our standing in my leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelenskyy.
Biden insisted he would stay in the election race, and there has been no indication that he cannot get the job done. Biden spoke for 58 minutes, including 15 minutes of unscripted question and answer, but it seemed unlikely to convince those already in doubt about his mental fitness. After the news conference, several more Democratic members of Congress publicly called on Biden to step down, joining at least a dozen more from his own party who have done so. Anna Chen, Cable News. A three-day NATO summit wrapped up in Washington yesterday, with leaders declaring unwavering commitment for Ukraine.
At this summit, we are turning a corner and putting in place the foundations for Ukraine to prevail. All of this support will make Ukraine stronger and more capable.
NATO agreed to maintain military aid worth 40 billion euros to Ukraine next year and to appoint a senior NATO official in Kyiv to strengthen coordination with Ukraine. As Ukraine continues necessary reforms, the leaders will support the country on NATO membership. On the other hand, the United States announced a new $225 million weapons package for Ukraine, aimed at shoring up the country's air defense systems. while Ukraine was asking for a game changer, which is Washington ending limits on the use of US-supplied weapons to hit targets inside Russia.
If we want to win, if we want to prevail, if we want to save our country and to defend it, we need to lift all the limitations.
The Biden administration only allows Ukraine to fire American-made weaponry into Russian territory to hit back against Russian forces that are attacking or preparing to attack them. Anna Chan, Cable News.
China's trade surplus soared to the highest in more than 3 decades in June, as exports jumped more than expected, while weak domestic demand meant imports unexpectedly weakened. Exports expanded 8.6% from a year earlier in US dollar terms, the highest level in more than 2 years, and exceeded forecast of an 8% increase. But imports surprisingly fell 2.3%, comparing with a forecast of 2.8% growth. That left a record trade surplus of $99 billion for the month, the highest since June 1990. In the first half of the year, exports increased by 3.6% year-on-year, while imports grew by 2%. In terms of trade partners, trade with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations surged by 10.5% in the first half of the year, cementing the bloc's position as the country's largest trading partner by region, followed by the European Union, which was down 0.7%. The United States remained as the mainland's third largest trading partner, marking an increase in trade value of 2.9%. Best Learn Cable News.